Morning. Today is Shabbos, Daf Kuf Vav 106. We'll begin from Kuf Hey Amabez, the bottom 105B4. Begin from around 6 lines from the bottom, and then the bottom of the left column 105B4. Amr B'chia Bar Abba, Amr B'Yochanan. B'chia Bar Abba said Amr B'Yochanan. Kol ha'mis'atzel b'haspedo shel chacham. Anybody who's lazy regarding the eulogy. Did we do one right before this? I'm not sure. Let's just go back one. Anybody know exactly where we got up to? We'll go back one. I'm not sure if we did or not. Either way, we'll review. Anybody who is lazy over the eulogy of a sage, deserves to be buried alive. They buried Yehoshua on the border of his inheritance in Timnath Sarach, which is in Har Ephraim, north of Mount Gosh. Which means they did not eulogize Yehoshua sufficiently, and therefore the mountain trembled over them to kill them because they didn't properly eulogize. And so if you don't properly eulogize someone, you deserve to die. Anybody who's lazy regarding the eulogy of a sage, his days will not be prolonged. Mida kneged mida, which is measure for measure, since he did not that the sages' life was cut short, so too heaven will not care about his life being cut short, Rashi says. With a precise measure, you'll contend with her when you send her away. It's a pasuk in Yeshaya, which is, the way Rashi explains it, is with the same measure of punishment that was applied to Egypt. When she expels the Jews, you shall contend with her. So just like the Mitzrayim were punished commensurate with their crimes, so too the Jews, when they need to be punished, are afflicted in a measure commensurate with their crimes. The Pas says in Shoftim and Judges, the nation served Hashem all the days of Yeshua. And they served Hashem all the days of the elders, whose days were prolonged after Yehoshua died. So we see the elders. So again, it says they served Hashem the days of Yeshua and the days of the elders that had lived many more days after Yehoshua. So we see those elders, even though they did not properly eulogize Yehoshua, they still lived a long life, which is contrary to what we just said, that you get a short life. Amar Loi, Rabbi Yochanan said back, Pavloi, you from Bavel, Yamim herichu, Shanim leherichu. You have to be very precise with the meaning of the pasuk. It says the elders' days were prolonged. It doesn't say their years. It says they had many days. They may have lived for many more days, but not for many more years, which means in reality, their years were cut short. So, according to this, the Man Yirbu Yimechem V'mei B'nechem says you serve Hashem. We say in Shema at least twice a day in order to prolong your days and the days of your children. Can you make the same inference? It only means days, but not years. If we serve Hashem, we'll have a lot of days, but not a lot of years. What does that mean? Yom v'lashan, days, but not years. Baruch Hashani, blessing is different. Which means if the word days is said regarding a blessing, you'll have length of days. That means you'll live a long life. However, if it's a person who didn't do the right thing, and it's saying he had many more days, that's actually meant to infer days, yes, but years, no. If one of the brothers died, Yadagu kala achan kulan, all the brothers should be concerned that they too may die. If one of the members of a group died, Tidag kala chabura kula, the whole group should worry about dying. Because Rashi says if once justice is being meted out on a certain group, you have to be concerned that it might pass from one to the next. Now, Amrila Demes Gadol, some say it's referring to where the greatest among them died. The Amrila Demes Katan, others say they were talking about when the least among them died, which means, so the Gemara in Bracha says a group punishment begins with the least important member. So if the least important one dies, the others should be concerned that that's the beginning of this plague entering that group. So again, some say you should be concerned when it's the head, and some say you should be concerned when it's the smallest one, the least one amongst them. Okay, let's move onward now in the Mishnah. We're now in 106A1, Kuf Vav Amid Aleph. So the Mishnah says, whenever you do a destructive act, that is going to be biblically exempt. So it's only be rabbinically forbidden, but not biblical. Tani, because remember, we learned that in order to be liable for Shabbos, you have to do malaches machshavos. It has to be a constructive act. Tani Rabavo kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Rabavo taught a brayz in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Kol hamekalklin b'turin. All those who act destructively are exempt. Chutz mechoivel umaver. With two exceptions to the rule. The two exceptions would be if you make a wound in somebody, or if you create a fire, even if you burn something, even if those are destructive by creating a wound or burning, those two would be exceptions to the rule, and you would be liable for them. Now, how do I know this? The Gemara in Baba Kama says that if somebody wounds somebody on Shabbos, he does not need to pay damages for the wound because he gets the death penalty for creating a wound on Shabbos. And that's a rule we've had many times called kamle b'derabba minei, that if you do an act that has two punishments, you only get the worst of the two punishments. Okay, so the Gemara Baba Kama says if you punch somebody in the face on Shabbos and create a wound, and you cause the like a black and blue mark bruising, that is a biblical liability for creating a wound on Shabbos, and therefore he can't sue you for damages, because since if you did it with warning and witnesses, you get the death penalty. So an act that carries a death penalty, and the Gemara Baba Kama talks about maybe even if you didn't get the death penalty, but an act that carries liability with death penalty, you're exempt for the other punishment. So what do you see? You see that wounding somebody has a death penalty. Now, how does it have the death penalty? I thought it's destructive. It must be that when it comes to wounding somebody, that's an exception to the rule, and even a destructive act would be liable. Gary, can you please mute yourself? We're getting a static over there again. Gary?
Yes.
Can you mute yourself, please? We're getting static.
Okay.
Thank you. In addition, the Gemara and the Gemara in Ksubis, and the Mishnah Baba Kama says if you burn down a stack of grain on Shabbos, so I go over to your silo and I burn down your grain, you cannot sue me for damages because I'm going to be liable for burning, ma'avir, okay? So and now that's also destructive. So what do we see? That even though the Mishnah says that destructive acts are not biblically liable, but it seems like there are two exceptions to the rule, which are wounding and burning, which would be biblical, you would have biblical liability. Okay, that's what the Brisa says. Amar le. So again, this is the Rabbi Vo taught this Brisa in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar le. Rabbi Yochanan said back to Rabbi Vo, Puk tni levara. He was not happy with that Brisa. Go ahead and teach your Brisa outside of our Beis Medrash. Chavo maver eina mishnah. If you want to say that over, that's not an authoritative ruling, what you just said over. I would say you're not liable anytime it's destructive, period, with no exceptions to the rule. V'imtim, so that it cannot be an authoritative ruling, what you just said. V'imtim, so and if you do find me a Tanaic source that you are liable for wounding and igniting, I'll tell you it's specifically in a constructive way. How can they be constructive? They can be. The wound is a case where you need the blood for your dog. You punched a guy in the face, but you needed the blood that's going to come out of the wound to give to your dog. So even though that's destructive, but that's also constructive because you're going to use the blood. In the case of igniting and burning something, it's somewhat where you need the ashes. So now the Meiri points out, even if the damage outweighs the benefits, but if you do get a benefit, that's still called constructive, and that would make you liable. So again, not that you're allowed to do it. If you go over and punch somebody in the face because you want the blood to give to your dog, even though it's the damage doesn't outweigh the benefit, at the end of the day, that's called constructive. So therefore, so we have a major machlokas over here. According to Ravo, the way he taught the Brisa, wounding and burning are two exceptions to the rule. And even if it's destructive, you're still liable. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's not true. It's only talking about when there's a constructive aspect of it. Okay? Now, now, Frakta Gemara, Bahanan Tanan, Kol HaMakalklin Peturin. Now, according to Rabbi Vo understood this brisa that there are two exceptions to the rule when it comes to wounding and burning, even if it's destructive or liable. The problem is our Mishnah. Our Mishnah does not give exceptions to the rule. Our Mishnah says a blanket statement. Vanantan kol hamakalkim b'turin. Our Mishnah says all destructive acts are biblically exempt. How does that work out with the brisa? The Gemara says actually a major machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Those are our two famous opinions we have all over in Shabbos. Mas Nisa and Rabbi Yehuda, Brisa Rabbi Shimon. Our Mishnah holds you're always exempt for a destructive act. Goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, and the Brisa says there are two exceptions to the rule, and you would be liable for wounding and burning, even if it's destructive. Is going according to Rabbi Shimon. Now Rashi says these two opinions, as far as we know, we have two major disagreements between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon in Shabbos. One is regarding a malacha she'eina tzrucha legufa, when you do malacha for not its intended purposes, and one is by a davar she'ein miskaven, when you do one act and an unintended consequence happens. Right? Rashi says, where did this like a new machlokas? You can't just pull out of a hat and say, oh, it's machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Where did they come from? Where is this machlokas that you have a new machlokas over here when it comes to destructive acts by burning and wounding? Would that be exceptions to rule? Rabbi Yehuda says, no, they're not exceptions to rule, and you're always exempt for destructive acts, and Rabbi Shimon holds you liable. The Gemara has no right to just pull two opinions out of a hat and just say, oh, yeah, it's machlokas Yehuda and Shimon. So Rashi says it's actually linked to the other machlokas that we know, or the other machlokas we know between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, which is that, and I'm just going to read note 7 over here. If you want this, it just goes through exactly how it's linked together. So basically, Rashi explains that according to Yehuda, this is his opinion about malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. Rabbi Yehuda holds malacha she'eina tzricha legufa if you do an act not for its intended purpose. Remember we had if you carry out the corpse from A to B, but your goal was not to get it to B, but your goal was just shouldn't be in A. That's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. So according to Yehuda, you're liable. That will play out to why, in this case, he will say you're always exempt for a destructive act. And therefore like this. So Rashi explains Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that the destructive act is linked to his opinion that you're liable for doing a labor not needed for its defined purpose. A ramification, I'm just paraphrasing note 7 here, a ramification of this position is that if a labor provides any constructive purpose whatsoever, it is punishable even if that purpose is not inherent in the action itself, right? So that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Malacha she'eina tzricha legufam. And when you do one act not for its intended purpose, Rabbi Yehuda holds you would be liable as long as it is constructive. Consequently, wounding and burning will be liable in the following cases. If someone wounds a person because he needs blood for his dog, he's liable even though his act was inherently destructive, which means the person was wounded. It resulted in the extraneous benefit of having the needed blood. Similarly, one is liable if he burns grain for ashes, for he receives some extraneous benefit from the inherently destructive act of burning. So meaning, if you punch somebody in the face and you want the blood for your dog, Rashi says that's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. Your malacha is you're punching the guy in the face, but your goal is not to punch the guy in the face. Your goal is to get the blood to give to your dog. So Rashi says that would be a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. If so, Rabbi Yehuda would hold you liable because that's called constructive. Okay? So those would be the cases where Rabbi Yehuda is liable. However, if acts of burning and wounding do not result in anything constructive, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the person exempt for the purely destructive act, and that's our Mishnah. So Rabbi Yehuda does not need exceptions to the rule. Rabbi Yehuda holds the rule as a blanket statement. Any destructive act is exempt, and that's what our Mishnah holds. It happens to be if you punch a guy in the face to get the blood, Rabbi Yehuda holds that that's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa, right? Because you did the punching in the face, not for the goal of punching the guy in the face, but for the blood. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds that's liable. So that's not an exception to the rule. That is the rule. That's called constructive. So the rule according to Rabbi Yehuda is destructive acts are exempt, constructive acts are liable. Rabbi Yehuda holds constructive means even in B, not in A. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds not an exception to the rule, but this is the rule. Any destructive act is exempt, but if it's constructive, even if it's constructive in a different direction, that would make it that you're liable. Okay? Now, Reb Shimon holds, in note 8 here, that person is liable only for something for its defined purpose, right? Because Rabbi Shimon holds malachish and itzrich legufa is pater, is biblically exempt. So according to this, if you punch something in the face and your goal is for it to feed it to your dog, that's called destructive, not constructive, because constructive for B doesn't count for A according to Rabbi Shimon. So how would he explain the cases where you're liable for wounding or for burning? He would have to say that those two are exceptions to the rule and you're liable even if it's destructive. Got it? Okay, now according to, so basically like this, Rabbi Yehuda holds a blanket uniform rule across the board. Destructive acts are not liable. It happens to be that if you destroy, but your goal is to constructive for B, that is called a malachish and tzrich legufa. Rabbi Yehuda is uniform across the board. That is his opinion. Rabbi Shimon holds in general for destructive acts, you're not liable. But wounding and burning are exceptions to the rule where you are liable even if it's destructive. What is the reason for Rabbi Shimon? Why are these two exceptions to the rule? So my time with Rabbi Shimon, what's the reason for Rabbi Shimon? So are you allowed to do a bris milah on Shabbos? Anybody know?
Yes.
Yes, I'm waiting for, so this is a problem. Every time it's cut and dry, Anthony says it's machlokas. And finally, when it's questionable, Anthony says yes. So it's not a machlokas, but it depends on the situation. What does it depend on? It depends on when the baby was born. If it's the 8th day from when it was born, so it's a bris bismano, you are allowed to do it. But if it was a nidcha, let's just say the baby was born on a Tuesday, and the mole said, hold on, this baby is sick, the earliest you could do it is Shabbos. Are you allowed to do it on Shabbos? Then no, right? So the answer is really the politically correct, it depends. But the answer is, you're right. It's yes, you could do it on Shabbos, but it depends, as long as it's bismano in the right time. Okay? It depends on a few other factors as well. So like this. We have a special pasuk that tells us you're allowed to do a bris on Shabbos. Now, is there a malacha involved in doing a bris that I would think, is there any biblical malacha involved in doing a bris? I mean, the Torah says you're allowed to, because it says of a Yom HaShmini, you're allowed to do a bris on the 8th day, even with Shabbos, right? What is there a malacha that it would have been if not for the fact that Torah permits it?
You have all the preparation. You have the preparation steps of bringing all the equipment.
That's a machlokas, if you're allowed to do that to break Shabbos, but the actual act of a circumcision.
Cutting.
What?
Cutting.
Cutting. Chovel. Well, it won't be a cutting, it'll be a chovel, wounding, right?
Yeah, that drawing blood. Yeah, yeah.
Drawing blood. Chovel, wounding, right?
Same as hitting the person. It's the same as hitting the person. It's the same as hitting the person.
So is that destructive or constructive?
Both.
Or it's according to go by Reb somebody. It's according if you talk holding by Reb Shimon or.
Okay, good. Malachish Lugufa, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So because you're cutting the skin with the goal to perform a mitzvah of the bris milah. But it's like this. If I need the Torah to tell me that you're allowed to break Shabbos and do a bris, that seems to imply in general, cutting, causing a wound would be biblically liable. But in general, it's destructive. So Rav Shimon says, must be wounding is an exception to the rule, and you're liable even if it's destructive. So again, Rav Shimon says, for the fact that Torah needs to tell you that you're allowed to do a bris milah on Shabbos if it's the 8th day, that would imply that in general, just causing a wound would be liable. Okay. That's the proof that Rav Shimon says that burning is an exception, that wounding is an exception to the rule, and even though it's destructive, reliable. Yes, Avram ben Beryl.
Isn't in the bris milah? Couldn't that be considered the final hammer blow?
Sure hope it doesn't use a final hammer blow.
No, but it's not because it's completing the human being, completing the man.
That's sounds more rabbinic than biblical because you're not like creating a utensil. That sounds like a little bit like separating meiser, like you're tithing your produce, which makes it then allowed to eat, which sounds more of a rabbinic, looks like a makbeh patish, final harm blow, but you're not. The actual final harm blow is a complicated malacha, but you have to actually make a utensil. So here it's different. Yes, I know on the spiritual realms you're completing the person, but I don't think that would be a biblical makbeh patish. But chovel, it would be. Wounding, it would be.
Okay.
Okay. So that, according to Shimon, that's obviously the fact Torah is telling you that in general giving a bris would be forbidden. Obviously, even destructive acts. So obviously, wounding is an exception to the rule, and even destructive, even though it's destructive, you would be liable, except for the case of bris milah. And how about the case of maver, by burning? Since the Torah prohibits the court to carry out executing the burning on Shabbos, if a daughter of a Kohen committed adultery, she's chayav sreifa. She gets burning, a special stringent punishment that she gets because she degraded her family in the kahuna. So you pour molten lead down her throat, and the Gemara learns out that you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Now, what malacha would that be? The court is not allowed to kill her through pouring this molten lead down her throat on Shabbos. So what malacha would that be? So according to Shimon, burning is destructive. So first of all, even though there's a constructive element in it, because when you kill somebody, it actually gives them, when the court kills somebody, it carries out their atonement, which is what they need to atone for themselves. But that would still be a malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa, which means it's not for its intended purpose. Again, because the actual act of burning is not the constructive act, it's B, which is the separate thing that she gets her atonement. So that would be malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. So what would be, so that's not called constructive, so it's called destructive, and the Torah says you're not allowed to do it. So we see that this burning in a destructive manner would be biblically prohibited. Now, why is it biblically prohibited? It's destructive. So Shimon has a source here that when it comes to malacha of burning as well, even though it's destructive, you would be liable for it. Okay? All right. So Shema Mina Maver Ba'al Machayev. So we do see that, again, these are the two exceptions to rule. And when it comes to burning and it comes to wounding, you are liable even if they're destructive. I just want to see. I know the commentators talk one thing here. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda. Now, remember, Rabbi Yehuda does not hold that these are exceptions to the rule. Rabbi Yehuda's rule is, as long as it's destructive, you're not liable. So how about these cases? So that means Rabbi Yehuda would have to say that these cases are constructive. How are they constructive? Rabbi Yehuda, Hasan Masakinu Kedavashi. So he'll tell you those two cases are actually considered constructive, like Ravashi. The Amar Ravashi, because Ravashi said, Mali Lasakin Milo, Mali Lasakin Klev. What difference is there between the repair affected? This is similar to what Andy was alluding to, Rabbi Yehuda holds like. What's the difference between what you're affecting through the bris milah or affecting through a utensil? Meaning it's constructive. This is what's needed to help out this child. So that's called constructive. Mal levashel psila, mal levashel samanin. And what difference is there if you're cooking the lead wick in order to execute her, or to cooking herbs as was done in the Mishkan, which means everything is constructive, Rabbi Yehuda says, in the act of killing the daughter's Kohen, because you need to heat the lead to melt it down, because my goal is I needed the molten lead in order to pour it down her throat. So when I'm heating up this lead, that's constructive, because I need molten lead. They say that's not destroying the lead, that actually strengthens the lead. So Yehuda says everything's constructive in that case as well. Rashi does point, the Ritva says that according to Rashi's explanation, that this would be a malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. You don't have to actually say that when I'm cooking the lead, it helps out the lead itself, because anyways, it's beneficial because this is what I need to accomplish it. But the Gemara is pointing out, we actually have direct benefits over here. So it comes out, according to Yehuda, The case of bris milah is constructive. This is what's helping out the child achieve perfection, as Andy said. The case of burning the lead is necessary because I would need to have the molten lead, and then I would need to pour it down her throat because that will give her atonement. So therefore, Yehuda, these are not exceptions to the rule. These are called constructive. So according to Yehuda, any destructive act is not going to be biblically exempt. If there's a constructive element in it, then either that's completely constructive or at least it's constructive for B, for the second purpose. That's a malach shensuch l'gufas. According to Yehuda, you would still be liable for that. According to Shimon, destructive acts in general would be exempt, but there's two exceptions to rule, which will be by the case of burning and the case of wounding. Even if it's destructive, you still would be liable. Okay? Then the Mishnah says, Shir hamalav and v'chulu, the measure of somebody who whitens is double the width of a sit. So we said a sit was a different distance between these two fingers. So double the width of the sit is what was considered constructive and prestigious. Rabbi Yossi machvi kafel. Rabbi Yossi demonstrated a double sit, which is 2 times. He would say 2 times this distance between the two fingers. Rabbi Chibra Ami machvi pasher. Rabbi Chibra Ami, though, he demonstrated it as a simple measure. So basically, according to Rav Yosef, he would say double this measure. And according to Rav Chibra Ami, he would do it as a simple measure, which is the space between the thumb and the index finger. This is equal to 2 of this. So instead of saying double this, just say use this amount, the distance between these two fingers, the distance between the thumb and the index finger, which is equal to double the length of space between the index and the middle finger. Okay, so there's 2 different ways how they would demonstrate this measure. That would be the minimum amount they'd be liable for whitening and some other malachos. Okay, Mazel Tov. Let's move on now to trapping. Okay, any questions so far on what we did so far?
No. Good.
All right, let's move on now to trapping. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hatzad tzipar lemigdol. Somebody who would trap a bird by driving it into a closet. Okay? Utzvi labayis, or a deer, you drive it into a house. You chase after the deer and you drive it into the house. Chayiv, you're liable for trapping it because right now it is trapped in that closet or in that house. Okay? And the sages say, Sipar lemigdol, yes, we agree that a bird, if you got your bird in the closet, that is considered trapped, like Rabbi Yehuda. However, utzvi legina lechatzer ulebeivarin. But chayiv, but a deer, so Rabbi Yehuda said you're liable for if you get a deer into a house, that's a smaller enclosure. The sages say no, even larger enclosures would be considered liable. So it's a deer, even if you drive it into a garden, courtyard, or enclosure, chayiv, you would be liable. So they say that even that is called, even larger areas are still called trapped. So this is going to be the big question. How trapped is called trapped? Trapped does not mean it has to be in a jail area that's 2 feet by 2 feet. If you take it from the wild and put it into an enclosure, that's called you just trapped it. And then you have machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be in a smaller enclosure like a house. The sages say no, even a larger enclosure like a garden, courtyard, or other type of enclosure, chayiv, you'd be liable for that. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, like kolak bivar and shavin, not all enclosures are the same. You can't just say if you get a deer into an enclosure, that's called trapped. It depends what type of enclosure it is. That called is a rule. Mechutzer say the putter. If when it's in the enclosure, it still lacks trapping, which means it's still hard to get hold of it. So it's not really trapped. If every time you try to get it, it's going to run away from you, that's not called trapped. So mechutzer say the putter. If it still is lacking trapping, which means you still need to trap it again to really get it, then you're going to be exempt from them. She'ena mechutzer say the chayiv. But if it doesn't lack trapping, which means it's trapped. I can get it whenever I want. I would be liable. Okay, so very interesting machlokas we're going to discuss now. How trapped is trapped? What does that mean to be called trapped? If I chase a bird into my house, is that called trapped or not? Okay, very interesting questions coming up now. So the Mishnah said by bird, it goes by closet. by animals, we have machlokas. Does it have to be in my house or even into a garden? Okay, so let's start now with the Mishnah in Be'ah. Now, we're going to talk about trapping on Yom Tov. Are you allowed to trap on Yom Tov?
If you let a shecht, you should be able to trap it, to catch it, to chef it. Maybe.
You would imagine so. So Gil says you're allowed to trap on Yom Tov. However,
if you need it to eat, you're allowed to trap, right?
and he also says you're allowed to trap on Yom Tov. Problem is the Gemara in Be'ah says you're not allowed to trap on Yom Tov.
Yeah.
So we have a machlokas over here between Andy and Gil against the Gemara in Be'ah.
What if you had a trap set prior to Yom Tov?
What?
What if you had a trap set prior to Yom Tov, and then after Yom Tov you went to the trap? Are you still trapping? Is that considered still trapping on that day?
So you want to know if you can set up a trap before Yom Tov that will trap on Yom Tov.
Right, and that should be okay.
Between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai we had regarding, in general, can you set up malachas to do that will take effect on Shabbos? Really, Shabbos is the main case we came up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in general, things like that. Well, we've discussed it a while ago, so I'm not getting back into it now. But in general, those things may be okay, but I'm not saying that as a blanket rule. Meaning, for example, you are definitely allowed to set up a lot of things before Shabbos. For example, when you set your air conditioner to go on Shabbos, you're doing a very similar type of thing. But again, I'm not getting into all. We're not going to visit all that now. Okay, so what's the difference? Gil had a good logic. His logic was, well, if you're allowed to shacht on Yom Tov, you should be allowed to trap on Yom Tov. The difference is as follows. You're allowed to do those things in Yom Tov that help increase your ability to enjoy Yom Tov. And this is, again, we're going to see more about this in Be'ah. So those malachas that are, the food would be fresher if you did this malacha on Yom Tov, those are the ones that became permitted. Those malachas that will not tangibly affect the freshness of your food were not permitted on Yom Tov. Good. For the freshness of your food, there is no difference if you trap this animal before. Andy, you're unmuted.
I'm sorry, I'm fighting with the dog.
What? For the freshness of your food, there's no difference if you trap before Yom Tov or on Yom Tov. Therefore, trapping was not one of the malachas that is permitted on Yom Tov. When it comes to shechting, there is nothing as fresh as freshly slaughtered meat today. Therefore, shechting is a malacha that was permitted in Yom Tov. Okay, so just want to keep that in mind. All right, Gil. So trapping is not okay in Yom Tov. We'll see more about the halachas of Yom Tov, Mitzvah Shem, when we get to Be'ah. Okay, so like this. So Tanan Hasim, we learned in a Mishnah over there in Be'ah. And by the way, so the fishermen amongst us, I was waiting for a fisherman to attack me and say, hold on a second, what are you talking about? If you catch a fish yesterday, it's not as fresh as if you catch a fish today. I was waiting for somebody to jump on me for that. So trapping should be okay, so you'll have fresher trapped fish. The answer is, you can trap your fish yesterday and keep it in the water. And just take it out of the water. I mean, the trapping itself does not have to be done on Yom Tov for that freshly killed fish. Because theoretically, you can trap your fish on Friday and keep it in a bucket of water, and then you'll just take it on Shabbos. So the trapping itself doesn't have to be done. There's no reason why it has to be done on Yom Tov. Therefore, trapping is not allowed on Yom Tov. Okay?
Rabbi Lev,
Yes.
I hear you say that if you're trapping an animal to eat on Yom Tov, that the reason you're allowed it because the fresher meat is better than like day-old meat?
I absolutely did not say that.
Sure sounded like you did.
It
No,
did. I thought you said that.
I did not. You're not allowed to trap on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Period. I said the difference between trapping and slaughtering is that slaughtering would allow you to have fresh meat on Yom Tov, as opposed to trapping will not affect the freshness of your meat, because theoretically you can trap your animal before Yom Tov and just shecht it on Yom Tov. So that will not affect the freshness of your meat. Therefore, you're not allowed to trap. And then I said, a fisherman might jump on me and say, what do you mean? A fish caught today is fresher than a fish caught yesterday. And I said back, but that has nothing to do with the trapping. Theoretically, you can trap it yesterday and keep it fresh in your water and just kill it today. and that will still be fresh. So the trapping does not affect the freshness. Therefore, trapping is not permitted.
Yeah.
Fred, go ahead.
What if you have an animal visiting you in your backyard that's destroying different things, and you try to set up a trap for it, and the animal goes into the trap and it's stuck there? Then what do you do? And it's a possum or a raccoon that we're talking about.
Please do me a favor and trap the raccoon that's by my house, Fred.
I'm trying to get rid of the one in my yard.
You're asking about Sar Balei Chayim. If an animal is in pain, how that works out with the halachas. Well, if it's trapped already, so you're not, if you're talking about setting up the trap before Yom Tov or on Yom Tov?
You're setting it up. It's set up, but it's
On Yom Tov or before? No, don't set it up on Yom Tov. Set it up before Yom Tov. And then it's caught in the trap. So you're asking about what there. It's you trapped it already. So there's not. You're not. What's the question? What are you going to do to it now? You're going to kill it. You're going to let it free.
Oh, it can still roam around in the trap, but what do you do with it?
I personally call the city and ask them to haul it away.
Lots of luck.
Leave it in the trap. You leave it in the trap for Yom Tov.
Right, you can't touch it. It's kind of
Not if it's one of those traps that hurts the animal, like a bear trap or something.
Okay, so if it's Sarabal, that's what I thought. So if it's a question of Sarabal Echayim, I'm not sure. I probably best is to have a non-Jew deal with it. I mean, I don't know all the factors about that. I mean, it's machlok if it's Sarabal Echayim causing pain to animals, it's biblical or rabbinic. But I don't know what you're going to do with it. If you're going to have somebody kill it, so probably you can notify a non-Jew that there's an animal tracked, and they can probably take care of it. We could talk more about those halachas. That's a separate factor, though. Okay, so bottom line is, you are not allowed to trap on Shabbos and Yom Tov, okay? Even though you're allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to trap on Yom Tov, because again, the trapping can be done effectively before Yom Tov, and you can have just as fresh meat or fish. Okay, so Tanan Hasan, we learned in the Mishnah in Be'ah, which talks about the halachas of Yom Tov. Ein sadim dagim min habivaron b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to trap fish from a fish pond on Yom Tov. Now, even if you might say, hold on, they're already trapped. They're stuck in my pond. That's not called trapped, because every time you stick your net in, they're going to swim to the other side. They're not trapped. They're still floating away. They're swimming away. Okay? So you're not allowed to trap fish from a fish pond on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to feed the fish in your pond on Yom Tov, because fish are muksa, because they're not allowed to be trapped, and you're not allowed to feed something that's muksa either. Can exert efforts on it. So this is, if it's your own pets, you're allowed to feed your own pets, but other pets and pets that are considered not trapped, you're not allowed to feed on Yom Tov. But you are allowed to catch wild animals or fowl that are in enclosures that they're trapped before Yom Tov, and you're allowed to feed them. So basically, if they were trapped in an enclosure before Yom Tov, so that means for you to go ahead and shecht it, you didn't trap it because it was already trapped. And you're allowed to feed them because since you're allowed to shecht them, they're not called muktzah, they're considered prepared for you already, and therefore you're allowed to feed them. Okay? So that's the Mishnah in Be'ah. For a minute, I'll ask you a contradiction from a brisa, Beivaron shel chayos, v'shel oifos, v'shel dagim, ein tzadim mehem Yom Tov. The brisa says you're not allowed to trap wild animals, fowl or fish, from their enclosures in Yom Tov. And if you're not allowed to trap them, that means they're called muktzah. And if they're muktzah, you're not allowed to feed them. So kasha chaya achaya, kasha oifos oifos. We have contradictions between the Mishnah and Be'ah and the brisa that regarding whether you are allowed to, if you have already birds or animals in an enclosure before Yom Tov, are you allowed to go ahead and take it now to kill it on Yom Tov? So again, shechting is allowed on Yom Tov. The question is a trapped question where we have that the Mishnah Be'ah says you are allowed to catch an animal or a fowl from an enclosure because it's already trapped there, so you're not trapping it anymore. The brisa says you're not allowed to. So we have contradictions regarding wild animals and regarding birds. Kasha oifos oifos. Like this. Bishlam achaya achayla kasha. I can understand within wild animals there's no contradiction. Harab Yehuda, Harabanan. We already saw in our Mishnah there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Because if you recall, Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah, what is considered trapped enough that you're allowed to grab it? What's considered trapped? Where does it have to be? Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be in your house. The animal is only considered trapped if it's in your house. The sages said no. Even if the deer is in a garden, courtyard, or enclosure, that's considered trapped already. So then it's very good. So the Brisa, which says if you have a wild animal in an enclosure, that it's not called trapped and you're not allowed to trap it, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. He says it's only called trapped if it's in a house. Harabana, as opposed to Mishnah, is like the sages of our Mishnah, that it's already trapped if it's in an enclosure. So therefore, if you grab it from there in Yom Tov, you didn't do anything wrong. It was already trapped. Okay? Just want to point out, what is called trapped has two different ramifications. One ramification is if you drive it into an enclosure on Yom Tov or Shabbos, did you just do a biblical malach of trapping? And the second nafkamina, the second practical difference would be, if you take it out of that enclosure to shecht it on Yom Tov, did you just trap it? Meaning, if you hold an enclosure, it's called trapped, which is a sage's opinion. That means if you drive a deer into an enclosure on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you just did a biblical malacha of trapping. But if it was in the enclosure before Yom Tov, according to sages, that's already trapped, and you're allowed to take it out of there on Yom Tov. Okay? So there's a leniency and a stringency. Rabbi Yehuda holds the opposite opinion. He holds just forcing a deer into an enclosure is not called trapped yet. Therefore, if you did that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, that is not a biblical malacha. That's a leniency. On the other hand, since it's not called trapped, if you have a deer in an enclosure, you're not allowed to take it from there and shecht it on Yom Tov because you just trapped it. So there's a stringency. Okay, so you see there's two ramifications. One regarding putting it in, one regarding taking it out. Okay, so we can reconcile the Bryce and the Mishnah based on machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Is a deer in an enclosure called trapped or not? Rabbi Yehuda says it's not called trapped. The sages say it is. If you look at our Mishnah, there is no argument regarding birds. The Mishnah said a bird in a closet is considered trapped, and nobody argued on that. So for a bird to be called trapped, it has to be in a closet. A bird in an enclosure is not necessarily called trapped because you can't get to it still, right? So so how do we have two opinions by birds, whether you're allowed to take them from this enclosure? Who would the opinions be? Perhaps to say even birds on birds is not a question. Ha beaver makara. Maybe you'll tell me the case of the Mishnah, which allows you to take the bird from an enclosure on Yom Tov. It's talking about a roofed enclosure. Maybe if it's a roofed enclosure, that's called trapped. Ha beaver she'ena makara. Maybe the Bryce, which says you're not allowed to take a bird from enclosure, is talking about an unroofed, an open enclosure. Maybe that's the difference. But that can't be. But habayis to makarahu. Now houses are generally roofed. Yet a bird in a house, is that called trapped or not? What do we know from our Mishnah, rabbis? Andy says no. You're 100% correct, Andy. How do you trap a bird? Where does it have to be?
Like in a closet.
Only in a closet. Excellent. But habayis to makari. We know that a house is a roofed area. Uvein Rabbi Yehuda, bein Rabbanan. Both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan hold. Sipur lemigdal in. The only way a bird is called trapped is specifically to a closet. Labayis lo, not in the house. So how do you have a machlokas between the Mishnah and the Brisa, whether a bird in an enclosure is called trapped or not? It's not trapped. There's no opinion that holds that a bird in an enclosure is trapped. Even if the enclosure is roofed, it's not trapped. The only way for a bird to be called trapped is in a closet. So Amar Rabba Bar Rav Huna said, Hacha b'tzipor deraraskinan. The Mishnah, where everybody agrees in our Mishnah, the only way for a bird to be called trapped is in a closet, is a specific type of free bird, a free-spirited bird. It's called a durar bird, lefisha ena mekabelas maros. A free, like we have a free spirit, so that's this free spirit bird over here. It does not accept any mastery. It was basically, you put this bird in a house, he will run fly from corner to corner. You'll never be able to get him. He will not accept your mastery. He'll never accept the fact that he's trapped. He will always fly around. This free-spirited bird, the only way to call it trapped is in a closet, right? However, other birds, if you stick them in a house, they'll understand you got them already. They're trapped. You got them. They're not going to start flying all over the place. The Tana Debei Rishmal. We're now 106b2. It was taught in the Yeshiva of Rishmal. Lama Nikra Shema Tzipor Durar. Why is this called the Durar bird, the free bird? The word Durar has to do with with living. Like a dira. You go to Eretz Yisrael, a dira is like an apartment, the place where you live, your house, your apartment, or a place where you stay. It's called a dira.
Is that the same as Dror Yikra? Dror?
Yeah, because that is free. Dirar yikara. Yeah, it means freedom, you'll call. So, Lamanik Shmat Sipor Durar. Why is it called the Durar bird? It lives freely in a house as it does in a field. So which means that even in a house, it's free. It's a free spirit. You'll never get it unless you can get into a closet. So specifically the Durar bird, which lives in a house as free as it lives in a field, that type of bird is the mission referring to when it says that is not called trapped in a house until it's in a closet. There's actually an interesting machlokas. This Durar bird is a specific species, or is it just talking about the general attitude of this types of bird? So,
Rabbi,
yes.
this is a little bit after the fact, but how about if you had an animal like a dog is trained to bring wild animals into your yard or into your enclosure, and you don't give it a command, but it just automatically brought a deer or a sheep or something into your backyard? Is that called trapping?
That is an excellent question, Gary. And the answer is, as far as I'm aware, you're not allowed to have your animals do malacha either. Your animals must refrain from doing work, except for one malacha. Which was the one malacha we said the animals are allowed to do?
Eat.
I don't know.
Fred, what'd you say?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Fred, what'd you say?
Eat.
Eat, which is the malacha of detaching, right? Other than detaching grass from its place of growth, which was critical for animals to survive, your animal cannot do malacha either. Your animals have to refrain, which is the reason why we saw that you're not allowed to sell certain livestock to non-Jews, because that might lead to renting, and then they might be carrying things and doing other malachas in your behalf. So, so the answer to your question is, Gary, your animals must refrain from doing work as well.
And Rabbi, can we assume that your machinery is the same as your animals, like your trucks and stuff, cars?
So if that would be the case, I would say that you have to make sure you turn off your air conditioning before Shabbos and your lights.
I don't mean that. I mean, you can't, your animals can't do work on Shabbos. That means you can't lend your truck out to somebody to do work on Shabbos.
I'm going to repeat the same thing I said. According to what you just said, meaning you're telling me you can't have your things do malacha on Shabbos. Okay, so let's put it like this. The general prohibition of your items doing malacha obviously cannot be across the board, because if that was the case, you would not be allowed to have your lights or your compressor of your air conditioner or your fridge go off on Shabbos, right?
Right.
That is okay. There is a concept that it looks like you're specifically someone doing work for you on Shabbos, which is an issue. So there is a concept like that. We have the case of like a bathhouse, and people will say, oh, it's Andy's bathhouse, which is operating, which means people are working for you on Shabbos. So that is a concern that it looks like your things are working. But so there's two different factors here. It can't be that people are viewing it like you're hiring workers and people are working on your behalf on Shabbos. But the actual issue of your machinery resting, which is machlokas, by the way, I believe it's between Bisol Shammai, but we paskin your machines are allowed to do work, because again, otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to do any of the things that we do on Shabbos. But it can't be, one second, there are exceptions to the rule. Moshe Feinstein talks about this. If it's to make like a public affair of it, and it looks like people are doing malach on your behalf. For example, there are those who wanted to say that an air conditioner would not be okay on Shabbos, especially the units you stick outside your house, because it creates a whole big to-do. Everybody sees it, oh, Andy's air conditioner is operating on Shabbos. But the bottom line is, you are allowed to set anything in your house, basically, you're allowed to set. Yeah, if you're gonna drive around, if you're gonna have your non-Jew drive your truck that says Andy's Construction, I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. Yes.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if Andy loaned his truck out on Wednesday to a non-Jew, and they were supposed to bring it back before Shabbos, and they didn't, and they used it on the weekend, would that be permissible?
Let's hold off on that. more complicated than what we're getting into right now. It may depend if it's noticeable, like it has a big sign that says Andy's truck or something. So let's hold off. That's really not our topic here. So let's just hold off when we get to those types of questions.
Okay. Okay.
Let's go back to let's go back to trapping, which is really our topic over here. We kind of like got derailed for a second. So again, what is this bird? According to Ramban, it's not a specific species, but it's any small species of kosher bird that lives freely anywhere. However, the Radak says it's like a swallow. It's a small specific type of bird. The Ibn Ezra says it was known as the songbird. So again, some hold it's a specific type of bird, this free-spirited bird. Others say it's just any species of bird that even if you put it in your house, it's just going to fly all over the place. Okay, so let's get this straight. So basically what we're saying is that this bird, which even if you put in your house will fly all over the place, that's what the mission is referring to, that it's only called trapped if it's in the closet. As opposed to other birds, though, it could be if they will accept your mastery over them and not fly all over the place, then it could be if it's in a roofed house, that's also considered like they're trapped already, and you would be able to take it to Shecht and Yom Tov. So basically the Mishnah that allows it, we're talking about a roofed enclosure, and the Brisa that calls it not trapped is talking about an unroofed enclosure. We're now in 106b2. Now that we've come to this, that we can work out the contradiction regarding the birds without having to say it's machlokas. Just we're saying it depends if it's roofed or not roofed. Remember, we said before regarding the contradiction of wild animals that it's machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan, right? But now we can have another way to work this out. Habavever gadol, habavever katan. You could just say it's not a machlokas, but rather you could just say the brisa which prohibits taking this wild animal is talking about if it's in a large enclosure, which is not trapped. Habavever katan, and as opposed to the Mishnah which says that it's already considered trapped with someone in a small enclosure. So and the sages of our Mishnah, we're talking about a small enclosure. So instead of saying it's machlokas or Yehuda and the Rabbanan between the brisa and Mishnah, you could just say that it all works out. It just depends if it's a large one or a small one. And the sages of our Mishnah are talking about a small one. So now, let's clarify, what is a large enclosure that the animal is not yet considered trapped in it, and what is considered a small enclosure that the animal is considered trapped? What's called a large enclosure? What's called a small one? Rav said, whenever you can chase the animal, and reach it in a single lunge. So some change it, instead of chasing after in a single lunge sounds like it's two different stages. You have to first run after it and then run and then jump to it. So according to Rajba and Bayam, according to Rashi, he takes out the words run after it, because if you have to run after it, then obviously you're not reaching it in a single lunge. So there's two versions in this Gemara. Is it saying two different steps? You run and then you lunge, or is it just if you could lunge at it? Bever cut, and that's called a small enclosure, which means if you brought the animal there on Shabbos Yom Tov, you did the biblical act of trapping. But if it was there before Shabbos Yom Tov and you take it out, that's not called the biblical trapping. Bever cut. So again, whatever you can reach in a single lunge is bever cut, and that's a small enclosure. But idach bever gadol, anything you cannot run after and lunge, or just lunge after, is called a large enclosure. Inami, alternatively, kolhecha denafel tula de kasam adadi. Wherever the shadows of the walls reach each other, so it's small enough the shadow of one wall reaches the opposite wall. Then the commentaries say, Tosis and others say, even though it really depends on the height of your walls, but there was something considered like a standard height in those days. Bever cotton. So if the shadows of the walls reach each other, that's called a small enclosure. Idach bever gadol, and if they don't reach each other, that's called a large enclosure. Alternatively, wherever there are not many corners that the animal can escape to, bever cotton, that's called a small enclosure. Idach bever gadol, and if it does have those small corners, it's called a large enclosure. Okay. Then we now have, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, not all enclosures are created equal. And those enclosures that you still need to trap it, that means it's not yet trapped. And those enclosures that it's already trapped and you don't need to trap anymore, that is considered trapped. So Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Mishmol Yosef, and Rav Yehuda, Mishmol Halacha Shimon Gamliel. The halacha follows the Shimon Gamliel, which basically, whatever, if you drive a deer into enclosure that's called, it's trapped there, then you just did the biblical liability on Shabbos of trapping. Amar le Abaye, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, halacha mechal de pligi. So is Rav Shimon Gamliel arguing on the opinions of the Mishnah, or is he just summarizing and clarifying them? So if Rav Yosef said in the name of Shmuel that we follow Shimon Gamliel, that seems to imply there are others who argue on Shimon Gamliel. So Amar le Abaye, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, halacha mechal de pligi. Does that mean that somebody argues with Shimon Gamliel? Meaning Shimon Gamliel is just saying a basic rule. If it's considered trapped over there, then you trapped it. If it's too big of an enclosure, not considered trapped, then you didn't trap it, right? Do the sages argue on that? Isn't that how we explain the sages' opinion as well? So Bai said, so why are you implying that we go like a Shimon Gamliel? Wouldn't everybody agree with that? Amar Lev Yosef back, my nafkulach minam. What's the difference? What's the difference if I implied or not that the sages argue? Meaning, either way, I'm telling you the halach is like a Shimon Gamliel, right? So why do you need to know if the sages argue or not? How's that relevant for anything? Meaning, what's the difference if the halach is like a Shimon Gamliel because nobody argues, or I'm telling you the halach is like a Shimon Gamliel and the sages do argue? What's the difference? The bottom line is I'm telling you, go like a Shimon Gamliel. That was Rav Yosef said back to Bai. Amalei Bai said back, Gemara, Zemar said to, hey, are you telling me to learn the tradition for no purpose, that it's just like singing a song? Meaning, what are you telling me exactly? I have to know what's going on over here. If you're telling me Shimon Gamliel just explaining the sages, then don't tell me go to Shimon Gamliel. Just say everybody agrees like this. So it's not clear if Rav Yosef accepts Abai's objection and agrees that Shimon Gamliel is just elaborating on sages, or whether Rav Yosef himself holds Shimon Gamliel disagrees with them. So it's not clear, but the bottom line is the Gemara is saying that we're going with Shimon Gamliel. Okay, 106b3. We're around 2/3 of the way down. Let's say you're walking in the wilderness and you find a blind or sleeping deer and you trap it. Is that called trapping? The halach is chayiv, you're liable. Chiger, let's say you have a lame deer you come across and you go ahead and trap it. Did you just trap it, or maybe it's already trapped because it couldn't run away from you anyways? The zaken, let's say it's too old to run away. The chayla, or sick, pater, you're exempt in those cases because you didn't do anything by your act of trapping. Anyways, it couldn't run away from you. Trapping means it was free and it could have run away and nobody had control over it, and you made it trapped. So if it was blind or sleeping, it still was not trapped. It could have run away from you. If it was lame, old, or sick, it couldn't run away from you anyway, so your act of trapping didn't accomplish anything. That's what the Bryce says. Amalei Ba'al Rav Yosef, Bryce said Rav Yosef, my shahani. What's the difference between the two of them? If it's sleeping or blind, it also can't run away from you. So that also, what's the difference between the two cases? The Gemara says, Hani avidi l'rabuye, the blind and sleeping deer are prone to slip away when they sense a person is nearby. Hani l'avidi l'rabuye, as opposed to the lame, old, and sick deer, are not prone to slip away. Therefore, it's not called like you trap them. There's a different price that says if you trap a sick deer, you're liable. Now, this first price says you're not liable. Rav said, Lakash, not a question. The last price is talking about that it's sick with a fever. If it's sick with a fever, it will run away from you. And therefore, if you trap it, it's called trapping. The first price is talking about when it's sick with fatigue. So it's too tired, it's too just sickly, it just can't run away. That's the case where you're not going to be liable. Somebody traps grasshoppers, gizin, which is an interesting machlok, is what gizin are. Rash says a type of grasshopper that you're allowed to eat on Shabbos, that you're allowed to eat in general, the kosher grasshoppers. The Ritva says they're prohibited for consumption by Jews, but are useful because Gentiles eat them. Or if you trap hornets or mosquitoes on Shabbos, chayiv, he would be liable. Divrei Reb Meir, these are words of Reb Meir. When the sages say, Kol shebeminoi nitzod chayiv, any creature whose species is usually trapped, you would be liable. B'chol she'ein beminoi nitzod pater. But if you trap a creature whose species is not usually trapped, you're exempt for that. So according to the sages, the malach of trapping, now this is biblical, I'm not talking about rabbinic, we're talking about the biblical malach of trapping, applies only to animals or fowl that are usually trapped for people by their use. So, for example, grasshoppers and gizin, which are fit for consumption, you would be liable for it. But hornets and mosquitoes, which there's no profession of trapping hornets and mosquitoes. You kill them, but you don't trap them. Therefore, you would not be liable for that. Tani Idach, we learned another brayso, Hatzar Chagavim B'Shas Hatal. If somebody traps grasshoppers during the time when there's dew on the ground, putter, you're exempt. Can anybody figure this out? Why? It's fascinating. Anybody know why? The Shas Hasharav, if you trap during the time of intense heat, Chayv, you would be liable. So basically, when there's dew on the ground,
You can't
Rashi
jump.
says the eyes of the grasshoppers are blinded and they're considered already trapped. Like you could just grab a grasshopper off the ground if there's dew on the ground. However, during intense heat, even if they're less active, but they're still able to jump away, and therefore you would be liable for that. Elazar ben Mahavai says, pater. Let's say grasshoppers are coming in swarms. They're all swarming at you. You just grab one out of the air. Did you just trap that or not? Is that trapping? So Elazar ben Mahavai says, that's not called trapping. You can literally grab it out of the air. If you could just grab it out of the air, that means it's trapped already. Remember, trapping means it could have gotten away from you, and you have done an act of making it, then now it's under your control. If there's swarms of them, you could just grab them. That's not called trapping. Yibarlu inquired, Elazar ben Mavai a Reisha Kai or a Seifa Kai? Which statement was Elazar ben Mavai going on? Was he going in the first section of the Brisa, which is even in a time of dew? The first step was in a time of dew. And is he saying even a time of dew, which the sages said you're exempt? Was he saying no, you're only exempt if you're swarming? Oh, a Seifa Kai, so that means he'd be a lead stringency. Or was he going on the end of the Brisa, which is saying that they're not blind or anything, there's no dew. Just in general, he's saying that if there's swarms of them, you're exempt, which means he's being lenient. Tashema, come learn a proof, which from this Brisa, somebody traps grasshoppers during a time of dew, pater is exempt, b'shas sharav, if you trap them during a time of tense heat, chayv reliable. Elazar ben Amavai says, even during the time of intense heat, which the sage says you're liable, but if they're swarming around, you're exempt. So he's being lenient, and the sage's last ruling.
Rabbi,
Yes.
it seems like if they were in the air and you grabbed it, you've trapped it in your hand. And this says that they're not trapped.
According to Elazar ben Amavai, if it's easily accessible, it's considered trapped. It was when you did that act of trapping, it was right in front of your face, right? That's not called trapping. That's like it's already, if it's in front of your face, easy for the grab. There's such a swarm of them, it's just too easy to grab. That's not called you did the act of trapping. That's Elazar ben Amavai. The sage will say probably what you're thinking. That's still called trapping, but he says it's too. Trapping means it was hard to get to, and you had to get it, and it was free. If it's a whole swarm, it's not free. Anybody can just grab them. That's considered kind of like the case where it's can't run away from you at that point.
So what if a bird came and you grabbed it out of the air?
That's free. I'm talking specifically like a swarm. Yeah. When there's a swarm, like they couldn't all get away from you.
Okay.
A bird will fly away from you.
What about a fish jumping out of the pond? Can't run away.
Well, where is it now?
It's on the floor. Would that consider like in the air? Like it has nowhere to go.
On the dry ground?
Yeah, let's say a fish jumps out of the pond of the water.
It can't get away from you.
Can't really move at this point.
As far as I haven't done any research on this, but as far as I'm aware, I would say that's called trapped already. I would say you're not liable. Again, as far as I'm aware, I'm not positive about this guy. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody talk about this, but as far as I'm aware, if the fish is on the ground and it can't get away from you, I would say that's not liable for trapping it because it can't get away from you. It's already trapped. No, that's what I would imagine. Sounds similar to the case of the bird in the closet. Okay, let's see the next case. New Mishnah. By the way, again, we have a very important concept here. According to the sages, you're only biblically liable for trapping those things that are normally trapped. That's a very important halacha. So we're not going to do justice this now. And hopefully one time we'll get to Shabbos home. We'll go through this more. But this has a lot of relevance to, for example, bees, people do trap. Mosquitoes, people don't trap, right? So there could be a huge difference between trapping a bee and trapping a mosquito. So, which is a big question. What do you do if a bee is bothering you? Especially in Sukkot, it comes up a lot. So, the question that I'm not going to do justice to now. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll get to in the Shabbos home. But basically, are you not allowed to do anything? Are you allowed to kill it, or are you allowed to trap it? Are you better off killing it, better off trapping it? Meaning might depend on what it is, because if it's something that's usually trapped, so if you stick a cup over a bee, that could be a biblical issue. Again, I'm not getting into it now, but you have to know, are you allowed to take action? If you're allowed to take action, is it better to kill the bee or is it better to trap the bee? And yes, Andy, you are allowed to set bee traps up definitely before Shabbos or Yom Tov. Definitely you are allowed to put up a bee trap, at least to get rid of the bees so it won't bother you. So again, we'll see more about that, but we have a new concept here that trapping something depends if it's something that's usually in its species is trapped, makes it worse than if something that's not trapped. It also make a difference if there's an element of danger or not to the people around. All right, let's see the next mission. A deer entered a house by itself. And you go ahead and lock the door. Is that called trapping or not? Yes, because till now it could have run out. It could have run back out through the door, and you just trapped it by locking the door. If you're find one person locked the door, if you're liable. No l'shnaim. Let's say two people lock that door together. So if you recall, we've had this. Remember, we had a major machlokas. If two people do action, does that exempt you? Now we had a three-way machlokas. Either some say you're automatically exempt if two people do it. Other opinion is no, you still have the same liability. And the third opinion is it depends if it's an action that's made to be done by one person or made to be done by two. So no l'shnaim, two people close the door, two and they're exempt. Lo yachol echad lino. And this is, again, the opinion we said earlier, that if something that takes two people, one person to do and two people do it, that's a weird way of doing it, and therefore you're exempt. Lo yachol echad lino. But if one person could not close the door alone, so it's a very heavy door that requires two people, no l'shnaim, then two people close it, chayav, and they would be liable. So this opinion says it depends if it's normal for one or two people to do it. Rabbi Shimon Paiter, however, Shimon exempts them, because if Shimon holds, you're always going to be exempt. Any malacha that is done by two people would automatically exempt you. Again, we've seen this three-way machlokas earlier. Okay? Amr Rabbi Yirmiyah ba'Abra, Amr Shmuel, Rabbi Yirmiyah ba'Abra, the name of Shmuel, Hatzad Ariba Shabbos. If somebody traps a lion on Shabbos, Eno Chayiv is not liable until you bring it into its cage, which is built specifically to restrain lions. Basically, a lion will destroy, Rashi says. If a lion gets angry, it will destroy whatever you're using to trap it. So it's not trapped. Unless you have a specific cage to hold this lion, a lion is never trapped because he will destroy everything that gets in its way. So that's another important concept. Okay, next Mishnah. Yashav echad ha'echad al Pesach. One person sits in the doorway. So this deer ran into the house, and now I sit down by the doorway, okay? But I don't fill up the doorway, so theoretically the deer can slip out past me. Yashav Hasheni Milo, and then Andy sits down next to me, and together we're blocking the whole doorway. So together we're trapping this deer. So who's liable, me, Andy, or neither? The Yashav Hasheni Milo, the second one comes and fills up the doorway. So now this deer is trapped. Hasheni Chayev, Andy is liable because I didn't trap the deer. When I sat down, the deer could still get out. When Andy sat down, he closed off the exit for that deer. He is liable for trapping the deer. Okay, how about this case? Yashav Arishon al Pesach u'milahu. If the person sat down in the doorway and he blocked it completely, so now I trapped in this deer. Uba sheni v'yashav etzida. And then Andy sits down next to me, and he's also big enough to totally close off this doorway. Okay, Uba sheni v'yashav etzida. Al pisham arishon v'halachli. And then I stand up. So it comes out now, what is holding this deer trapped? It's Andy, not me. So who's liable in this case? I am liable and not Andy. Why? Because I trapped it. Andy didn't do nothing. He sat down when it was already trapped. Harishon chayav hasheni pater. Me, the first one, is liable. The second one is exempt. Halamaza daima. What is this comparable to? No, it's basically shamer. If somebody locks his house to safeguard it, and a deer is found to be guarded within it, which means, Raj says, we're talking about if the deer was already trapped the day before, and it's found. If the deer has already been trapped the day before, is found guarded in the house, which is that it's you closed it, but it was already found to be guarded within, which is just note 40 over here goes to the case. It's referring to a case where, for example, a deer is bound inside the house, and someone then locks the door. Since the deer, at the time the person locks the door, is in any case trapped, locking the door merely increases the security of the trap, but you're not actually trapping it. Therefore, even if the deer escapes the original trap, for example, let's say the deer tears down the rope that was binding it, and is therefore found to be trapped only by virtue of the subsequently added lock, the person who locked the door is neither liable nor required to release the lock, since at the moment of locking the door, no act of trapping was performed. So therefore, subsequent events cannot retroactively cause the act to be viewed as an act of trapping. So in our case, when Andy sat down, he didn't trap it because I had already trapped it, and therefore he's not required to get up when I get up, even though he turns out he's the one trapping it, but he did not do an act of trapping. Yes, Steve?
2 points, an observation and a question. The first thing, in terms of who's able to do work on Shabbos, we should all pay attention to Kiddush. When we say Kiddush tomorrow, about who's not supposed to do work for you. And the second thing is, many times we see that the opposite of something is also forbidden, like a tolda of something. So if you come across a trapped animal, if you let it go, is that something you shouldn't do?
That's an excellent question. So first of all, just your first point, thank you for both your points. So just to point out, everybody, please notice what Steve said. If you say the whole Kiddush, by the way, there are two different customs about how much Kiddush you say, but we do say your son, your daughter, your animals, and your maidservants, right? Your servants, your maidservants all have to refrain from doing work. So thank you, Steve. Yes. Regarding what you just said, I'm laughing because I asked this question to Yitzhak Berkowitz around 15 years ago. He's a Rav in Sanhedrin Rechevet. The question I asked him was, this is bringing back good memories. I haven't thought about this in 15 years. So they have these huge garbage dumpsters in Eretz Yisrael on all the streets. That's basically this huge garbage. It's not like you have your own garbage can. We have these apartment buildings with a huge dumpster. And you keep the dumpster closed so the cats can't get into it. There's tons of cats around Yerushalayim. Okay? And basically, you take your garbage from your apartment, you bring it to the dumpster, which is literally like on the sidewalk by the street. So I said to him, what happens if you need to throw out your garbage and there's a cat inside the dumpster and you open the dumpster and the cat jumps out? So did you just do the malacha of untrapping, which is Steve's question? So
now that is scary.
It is scary. You could have there's tons of cats around the sun. It contains the mice. I believe he said, I have to revisit this. I haven't thought about this. I believe he said that there's no sort. Don't quote me on this. I have to find this. I believe he said that it's not simple that we find that the opposites of malacha are forbidden. Meaning some of the malachas, we have the opposites, like untying a knot and tying a knot. But there specifically, we have both of them. I believe he told me bottom line is not to worry about it because it's not simple that would be called a malacha. I don't know if he was saying that nobody holds the malacha, but it's not simple to call that a malacha. That would be the act of untrapping.
Yeah, but in your case, you didn't necessarily do anything. You didn't know that the animal was there. It's sort of. Okay, so is that called? You're saying that's a misasek when you do an action you don't know. Okay, well that's a good point also. But let's say I hear the cat. Okay, well let's just say I hear the cat inside and I want to open it to let out the cat. I'm not giving you a bottom line ruling. I have to research it again because this has happened 15 years ago. I'm pretty sure he said that many say that we don't find that the opposite is called a malacha, which means okay. But before we rely on it, I would like to do further research because this happened 15 years ago. But you brought back good memories. That's the case that they talk about. It's a good case. Okay. All right, Shkoyach. All right, let's just do a little Shabbos kitchen. The status of the ladle. The ladle is a huge machlokas. What is the status of a ladle of soup? Which means when you have soup in you cook your soup in your pot. Your pot is called a what? A kli rishon. And then you take the ladle and you ladle out soup and then you have it in your bowl. So when your soup in your bowl in front of you on Shabbos, is that soup in a kli sheni or a kli shlishi? Which has big ramifications. For example, uncooked spices, right? Do you have to go, remember, first vessel, kli rishon, there's definitely problems with cooking. Kli sheni, we said the second vessel has the ability to cook with 4 exceptions to the rule. So when you're dealing with kli sheni, you have to be very knowledgeable to what's allowed, what's not allowed. A kli shlishi, the third vessel, almost everything is allowed, except for we have the cases of the tea leaves and eggs. Other than that, a kli shlishi, you can do whatever you want. So your bowl of soup that's sitting in front of you, which was in the pot, and then you ladled it out from the pot that it was cooked in into your bowl. The question is, that ladle, does that call the second vessel, and that cools off the soup to some extent,
and therefore by the time the soup gets to your bowl, it's a kli shlishi? Or is the ladle not have a status of its own vessel, which would mean the soup in front of you is a kli sheni? So that is huge ramification. Do I have to think every time I put something into my soup whether it was cooked or not and whether it falls into the criteria of a kli sheni or not? It's like this, page 35. When a ladle is used to take soup from a kli rishon, the pot, there's a question as to the status of the ladle. Some posts can take the basic view that the ladle is a second vessel, making the bowl and the soup that's in front of you is a kli shlishi. According to this, you could, for example, baked items. Are you allowed to put matzah or challah into your soup? So according to this, it would be permissible to add baked items or any spices to a bowl of soup. Other posts can rule that because the ladle is submerged in the pot, it has the same status of the pot, which is a kli rishon. According to this view, the bowl is only a kli shlishi, which you would not be allowed to add baked items like sticking your challah into your soup. Challah is baked, right? You're not allowed to cook something that's baked, or uncooked spices. So there's huge ramifications and it's a major machlokas. In practice, this is the bottom line. The following rule should be observed. With regarding uncooked spices, the ladle should be considered a kli rishon, making the bowl a kli sheni. Therefore, before adding any uncooked seasoning to a bowl of soup, one must transfer the soup to a kli shlishi or wait until the soup cools beyond yad shletisbo, less than 110 degrees. So if you want to be sure, take your bowl of soup and just pour it into another bowl. And then you're good to go, okay? With regarding baked items, we may consider the ladle a kli sheni and the bowl a kli shlishi. Since the issue of cooking a previously baked item is itself the subject of debate, in the case of a ladle, we may follow the lenient view, which considers the ladle a kli sheni and the bowl a kli shlishi. Thus, it is permissible to add pieces of matzah or croutons to soup that was put into a bowl with a ladle. One is also permitted to pour soup from the ladle directly onto a baked item, as pouring from a kli sheni falls under the rule of a kli shlishi. However, a ladle left in a pot, if the ladle is left in the pot for an extended period, you leave it in while you're serving, it's in there for a while, or if it is immersed many times in succession, all posts can agree that it takes on the status of the pot as a kli rishon. In this case, the bowl is certainly only a kli sheni, and one may not add baked items or uncooked seasoning unless the soup is transferred to a kli shlishi or cools beyond yad shletisbo. Note, this question regarding a ladle is irrelevant regarding pre-cooked seasoning regarding salt, which may be added to a kli sheni anyway. So we're talking about uncooked spices. Salt, either way, could be added as long as the salt is cooked. Summary. Soup transferred from the pot to a bowl by means of a ladle is in some respects treated as a kli sheni, still in the second vessel, and in others as a kli shlishi. Uncooked spices should not be added to that bowl that's in front of you, but baked items are allowed to be added. If the ladle was left in the pot for an extended period or was immersed many times in succession, the bowl is definitely considered only kli sheni, and even baked goods should not be added until it cools. So bottom line, if you want to stick your challah, dip it into your bowl of soup that's in front of you. If the ladle was not left in for an extended period of time or not used many times in succession, you are allowed to do that. If the ladle was left in for extended period or is dipped in many times in succession, then you would need to pour your soup to a third bowl, and then you can do whatever you want in that third bowl as long as you're not pouring tea or eggs into that third bowl. All right? Go ahead. Okay, Avram, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the rewards you get for doing acts of kindness. Now we're moving into if you refuse to give charity. Refusing to give charity is equivalent to idolatry. Ignoring the need to give charity is equivalent to idolatry. A person who does so is called a bilya'al. What if I said that? A lawless person.
Bli'al.
Say it again.
Bli'al.
Bli'al.
Lamed yod ayin lamed. That means like without a yoke. And ol is a yoke. So bli'ol, like bli'al, is like without a yoke.
Okay, that's a person, a lawless person. How offended would we be if someone called us such a nasty name? And how much more ashamed would we be for making ourselves deserving of this name? Refusing to give charity makes a person poor. Someone who refuses to support a poor person with a charitable gift or loan should be very worried that the poor person might cry out to Hashem against him, and Hashem will punish him by making him poor. Even a person who does give some charity but does not give as much as he should based on his ability could lose not only his own wealth, but the wealth of others that is tied up with his own. Punishment for refusing to give charity. A person who refuses to give charity and do kind deeds must descend to Gehenna. Chas v'shalom. One should never underestimate the mitzvah of supporting the poor. Doing so entails 24 blessings, while failing to do so entails 24 curses. Abstaining from charity and kindness causes Hashem to rescind his peace from Bnei Yisrael.
Andy, that sounds kind of weird. What if you got these people standing on the corners begging for money, and if you don't give them any money, it seems what you're just saying that you're liable.
Well, now Rabbi's here, so he can. But first of all, I think we're talking about Jewish people. Real charity is giving to your brother. I think I may be wrong about that,
Yeah.
but you know what? The truth of it is, if someone, I learned this a long time ago, and Rabbi, please, if someone asks, that probably means they need. So I don't know, but I think the laws of this are probably about Jewish people, your brothers. Rabbi, is that right?
And before, Rabbi Law, before you answer, what if 50 people come into the shul and say we all need money?
Okay, good question. So a few different things. Number one, as far as we're talking about specifically Jewish people, there's a mitzvah, this chesed, you can help out non-Jews as well, but this mitzvah of charity, I believe it's only to Jewish people. Number two, I've heard differently than Andy said regarding if somebody asks, it means they need it. There's many communities, as Sid said, that you'll have lots of people asking. But what I've heard over is, if you don't know if they need it, and you have a reason to assume that you don't know if they really need it, there are lots of fake fraudsters out there. So, and many people are really collecting for drugs. And that's the opposite. It's not a mitzvah to support somebody's drug addiction. So therefore, it's accepted practice in many communities that the person asking for charity needs to get an approval from a rabbi saying that I know that the person is justified in what they're asking for. I've heard over if the person doesn't have any rabbi who stands behind him, you don't have to. Nowadays, and I'm pretty sure Barry did this in Miami. There's a basic vetting system nowadays, and the person, if they're legit, they should go. There's a standard practice nowadays that you go to certain rabbis and they will approve you, or certain boards, and they'll approve you. They'll say that we understand your situation, and we're approving you to collect. If the person doesn't have that, it raises suspicions, and I don't think you could say to them, I want a rabbi who will confirm that you're authentic. There's another concept as well. You only have to give tzedakah if you're able to give charity. If you're giving charity will make you need charity, or you don't have the ability to give charity, there are exemptions to the limitations of charity. So I just want to point that out as well. So number one, you have to know your own financial situation, if you're in the ability to give charity or not, or it could be if you don't have a lot, maybe you just say 25 cents. That's also a mitzvah tzedakah. So if you don't have the means to give charity, then you're not necessarily, you have the same level of obligation to charity. And again, I've heard if you want to fulfill at least the bottom line level, 10 cents or 25 cents also fulfills that obligation of tzedakah. So it's not simple. If you don't have the means, you're not necessarily required. Even if you are required, it could be you only have to give a little bit, like 10 or 25 cents or whatever amount. In addition, if the person you have suspicions are not authentic, which a lot of days there are a lot of people not authentic, you don't have to give them if they can't get a rabbi. Listen, I would love to give you, but I need a rabbi who will confirm your situation. And that is a normal thing for a person to say.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I have in the reading of the halacha of kindness and charity, I get the feeling, sort of the feeling when they talk about giving to someone who is poor, we're talking about people that people that live in your community. There's a whole different thing about strangers that come. Am I wrong about that, or am I right?
Right. There's an order of preference, and again, if you don't know this person, you have a right to say to them, listen, I don't know you at all. I would like you to show me a letter from a rabbi that knows you. There's nothing wrong. I would encourage that, because otherwise you could be feeding a drug addiction. There's many of them that are in drugs that they're just collecting. So you have a right to say, not only that, there's many communities, what they do is that you have to make the check out to the rabbi's fund, and then he will give the check to this person. And that way, you know, everything is above board and authentic. So you actually have a right to say, I will make it, for example, I think it's that Aguda in Chicago. You make the check out to that Aguda, say, I'll give you this check. It'll make out to the Aguda. They will then give you the funds. And that's why I know that I'm not throwing away my money, because I know that everything is being vetted through them. So that's normal standard practice. But again, if 50 people come to you and you don't have the money to give 50 people, that's another concept that if you're not able to, you're not required to. Mm-hmm. And even if you are required to, it's very small amounts. A pruta theoretically would fulfill your obligation, which is like 5 or 10 cents. Theoretically would fulfill your obligation.
Ellie,
right.
where'd we get up to in the Gemara?
Right to the top of the next daf, which is Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, right at the top.
Rabbi Abba?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, everybody have a great Shabbos. Shkoyach, everybody.
All right,
Shabbos,
Shabbos, everybody.
Take care. Shkoyach.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Ellie.
Shabbos, thank you.